The world had dissolved into a maelstrom of horizontal rain and shrieking wind. On the radio, the voice of Master Chief Adam Sterling was barely a coherent whisper, torn apart by violent, crackling static. Mayday, Mayday. This is Ghost Platoon. We are a pinnet. Requesting immediate evacuation. Rehandled requesting. The only reply was the roaring gale. Lightning ripped across the bruised purple sky, and for a fraction of a second, the derelict shipping yard of Ras Al Hadid was illuminated in stark, terrifying detail. It was a graveyard of ambition-rusting cranes loomed like skeletal dinosaurs, and rows of shipping containers formed a maze of corrugated steel. In that flash, Sterling saw the muzzle flashes that had them trapped. They weren't scattered sparks. They were a methodical, interlocking web of death, stitching the air from 3 directions. He was pressed against a crumbling seawall, the coarse concrete biting into his cheek. A warm, sticky trail of blood, not his own, was streaked across his face, a grim reminder of Petty Officer Evans, who now lay motionless 20 feet away. Rainwater mingled with the blood, washing it into pink rivulets that disappeared into his fatigues. His team, Ghost Platoon, the tip of the spear, the best the Navy had to offer, was being systematically dismantled. They had been baited into this kill zone with flawless precision. What was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission to tag a cache of surface-to-air missiles had turned into a brutal, close-quarters ambush. The enemy, the disciplined Asakar Brigade, had been waiting. They knew the terrain. They knew the storm was coming, and they knew that air support would be a fantasy. "Status!" Sterling barked into his cums, his voice raw. "Harker's hit?" "Leg wound? Bad," came the strained reply from Doc Ramirez, the team's corpsman. "I can't get to him. They've got that whole alley Z ammo." "Count," Sterling yelled, his knuckles white as he gripped his rifle. The answers came back, grim and clipped. "1 mag, 2. I'm on my last 30 rounds. Chief." They were bleeding out, in terms of both men and ammunition. The machine gun nests had them perfectly triangulated. One was perched atop a stack of containers. A second was dug in behind an old Port Authority building. And the third, the most lethal, was spitting fire from the darkened window of a derelict customs house. Every time one of his men so much as shifted, a hail of lead chewed up the concrete around them. Hope was a currency they had run out of. Sterling risked a glance over the seawall. The customs house was 200 meters outtan. Impossible shot in this weather for a standard-issue rifle. A sniper was up there. He was sure of it, picking them off with chilling precision whenever the machine guns forced them to stay put. He watched as another burst of automatic fire kicked up a spray of salt water and gravel near Harker's position. The wounded SEAL groaned, a sound that was swallowed by the storm. They had minutes, maybe less, before the enemy would feel confident enough to maneuver and finish them off for good. He squeezed his eyes shut, the weight of command settling on him like a shroud. He had led these men through hell and back, but this felt different. This felt like an end. He bowed his head, muttering a final, desperate plea into the radio. "Any station." "TC's Ghost. We are combat ineffective." Then, through the cacophony of the storm and the relentless chatter of machine guns, a new sound cut the air. It wasn't the familiar crack of their M4 South, or the heavy thud of the enemy's weapons. This was a deep, authoritative boom, a thunderclap that felt separate from the storm itself. It was the voice of God, and it spoke with a half-inch piece of lead. 200 meters away, the sniper in the customs house window jerked violently, as if hit by an invisible truck. The man's rifle flew from his hands, and his body slumped, disappearing back into the darkness. The SEALs froze. Every man who could turned their head, eyes wide with disbelief. It wasn't one of them. The shot had come from somewhere else, from the city behind them, from the heart of the storm itself. Who was out there? Who had just answered their prayer 3 hours earlier, while Ghost Platoon was gearing up? Gunnery Sergeant Anya Sharma sat alone in the dim, cavernous supply depot of the forward operating base. Her office was a small, wire-caged corner of a warehouse filled with the smells of gun oil, canvas, and damp concrete. To the outside world, she was the gunny, the gatekeeper of requisitions, the woman you went to for ammo, spare parts, and missed. Her domain was paperwork, inventory logs, and the endless, thankless task of accounting for every bullet and bandage on the base. Leaning against the wall beside a desk was an old friend, though it looked more like a piece of artillery than a rifle. The Barrett M8 2A1, all 50 inches and 30 pounds of it, was her constant companion. Its matte black finish was worn smooth in places from her hands. Most of the operators on the base saw it as a bizarre affectation. They'd whisper and snicker as she walked from the depot to the firing range. This quiet, unassuming woman lugging a cannon meant for disabling engine blocks. There goes the paperwork sergeant. They'd joke, probably going to shoot a hole in a filing cabinet. They saw the rifle, but they didn't TC. The woman, they didn't know that in a classified training exercise in the Nevada desert, she had once hit a man-sized target from 2,100 meters. A shot that the instructors had initially dismissed as a fluke until she did it again. The report was buried, classified under a mountain of black ink because her role wasn't on the front lines. She was logistics, a support element. A woman with that kind of skill was an anomaly, and the system didn't know what to do with anomalies except to file them away. While the men of Ghost Platoon were in the mess hall, laughing and loading up on carbs before their mission, Anya was in her cage, filling notebooks with data that would make a meteorologist's head spin. Wind, speed, humidity, barometric pressure, Coriolis effect. She wasn't just tracking the weather, she was studying it, learning its language. The storm rolling in off the Arabian Sea wasn't just a storm to her. It was a variable, a complex equation that would affect trajectory, sound, and visibility. She had overheard the mission briefing for Ghost Platoon. Ras Al Hadid, a derelict port. Intelligence suggested a light insurgent present. It was the word light that had coiled a knot of ice in her gut. Intel was often wrong, a best guess wrapped in optimism. And this storm felt different. It was an amplifier, a force multiplier. It would mask movement, distort sound, and turn a simple operation into a blindfolded knife fight. Her instincts, honed over a decade of watching operations unfold from the logistical side, were screaming. She saw the patterns others missed, the subtle increase in enemy chatter, picked up by signals intelligence, the unusual quiet from local informants, the way the pieces just didn't fit. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Ghost Platoon wasn't walking into a reconnaissance mission. They were walking into a perfectly laid trap. She could have gone to the base commander, a man who saw her as little more than a glorified clerk. He would have patted her on the head, thanked her for her concern, and told her to stick to her inventory sheets. She had learned long ago that in a world of loud voices and high-speed operators, a quiet woman with a notebook full of calculations was invisible. So, she made a choice. She logged into the system and requisitioned 2 magazines of 50 caliber rifles MK, 211 rounds for herself. Burying the entry under her weapons maintenance and zeroing code, she packed her ghillie suit, a custom-made monstrosity of burlap, dyed netting, and local vegetation that made her look like a heap of swamp debris. She checked her rifle, cleaning and oiling every moving part with the practiced, gentle hands of a surgeon. As the first fat drops of rain began to splatter against the tin roof of the warehouse, she slipped out of the base, a ghost moving through the shadows. She wasn't disobeying orders. She was simply going to a place where she could watch, a place where a paperwork sergeant with an enormous rifle might, just might, be able to balance the books. The assault vehicles carrying Ghost Platoon splashed through the flooded, potholed streets of Ras Al Hadid's industrial sector. The rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers did little to clear the sheets of rain that lashed against the armored glass. Visibility was near zero. The world outside was a gray, streaming blur. Master Chief Sterling felt that familiar permission tension coiling in his gut, but this time it was laced with a deeper unease. The city was too quiet. The storm was too loud. They dismounted into the teeth of the gale, the wind tearing at them, trying to rip the rifles from their hands. The plan was simple. Move in, plant a beacon on the missile cache in Warehouse 7, and be out before the storm peaked. Simple. The first sign that simple was off the table came not as a gunshot, but as a blinding flash followed by a deafening roar. An RPG shrieked from a second-story window of a dilapidated factory, impacting the lead vehicle with a concussive blast that threw 2 of his men to the ground like dolls. The ambush had been sprung. Suddenly, the air was alive with the sound of angry hornets. Heavy gunfire erupted from everywhere at once. Windows that had been dark moments before now spat tongues of flame. The concrete corridors between buildings, which were supposed to offer cover, became killing fields. Bullets ricocheted with high-pitched whines, chipping away at their meager protection. The rain, their supposed ally in stealth, was now working for the enemy, masking their positions and making it impossible to pinpoint where the fire was coming from. Contact front. Contact. Right. Sterling screamed into his radio, but his words were swallowed by a fresh wave of static. The storm was savaging their communications. They were on their own. He shoved 2 of his men behind a large concrete barrier as a sniper S round sparked off the spot where they had just been standing. They were being systematically herded, pushed deeper into a pre-selected kill zone. He saw Doc Ramirez trying to crawl toward a wounded SEAL, only to be driven back by a disciplined burst of machine gun fire that kicked up plumes of water from the puddles around him. The man bled in the open, his life draining away into the grimy water. The storm wasn't just a storm anymore. It was a cave. It drowned out their cries for help and smothered any hope of calling in close air support. The jets and helicopters might as well have been on another planet. Sterling's training took over. He directed fire, tried to establish a baseline of suppression, and looked for a way to break contact. But for every enemy position they suppressed, 2 more seemed to open up. The Osaka Brigade was well-trained and deeply entrenched. They had turned the entire sector into a 3-dimensional death trap, with interlocking fields of fire that left no safe corner, no covered approach, no path to retreat. Petty Officer Evans, his youngest team member, made a desperate dash for better cover. Sterling saw the move in slow motion, the young man's determined face, the driving legs, the hope of survival. He also saw the muzzle flash from the customs house window. The .338 Lapua round hit Evans high in the chest, and he went down without a sound. That was the moment the fight bled out of them, replaced by a cold, grim resignation. They weren't a SEAL team anymore. They were just targets waiting their turn. Sterling found a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. He knew what he had to do. He had to make the call. He keyed his mic, his voice cracking with a mix of fury and despair. Any station, this is Raven Team. We are combat ineffective. It was the most difficult transmission he had ever made. An admission of utter and complete defeat. He was telling the world that Ghost's platoon was about to be wiped out. As he released the key, he waited for the final, brutal onslaught that would end it all. 800 meters away, a world removed from the desperate, close-quarters slaughter. Anya Sharma lay perfectly still. She was prone on the rusted, corrugated roof of a collapsed warehouse, a forgotten relic from a more prosperous time. The wind howled around her, a physical force that threatened to peel her from her perch, but she was an anchor of calm in the heart of the tempest. Her ghillie suit, soaked and heavy, blended seamlessly with the decaying, herby landscape, making her less a person and more a part of the ruin. Rainwater slid off the bill of her cap and trickled down her face, but she didn't blink. Through the high-powered optics of her scope, the chaos below was not chaos at all. It was a chessboard, and she was seeing every move with pristine, ice-cold clarity. She saw the muzzle flashes, the enemy positions, the angles of fire. She saw the trapped SEALs, their movements growing more desperate, their options dwindling to zero. She had spent the last hour crawling to this position, moving with a patience that bordered on She had waited, watched, and calculated. She tracked the wind, letting the gusts buffet her, feeling the rhythm of the storm. In her mind, she was no longer in Ras Al Hadid. She was back in the Nevada desert, the firing range instructor's voice a distant echo, Don't fight the wind, Sergeant. Dance with it. Her crosshairs settled on the darkened window of the customs house. She saw the faint heat signature of the sniper who had just killed Petty Officer Evans. He was arrogant, comfortable, certain of his safety. Anya exhaled slowly, her breath a small puff of fog that was instantly snatched away by the wind. She adjusted for windage and elevation. The numbers not just a calculation but an instinct. Her finger rested on the trigger. The world narrowed to the 10-power magnification of her scope. She squeezed. The boom of the Barrett was a physical concussion, a punch to her shoulder that she absorbed with her entire body. The .50 caliber round, a high-explosive incendiary armor-piercing projectile, left the barrel at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. For a fraction of a second, it was the only thing in the universe that mattered. It tore through the storm, impervious to the rain, and found the sniper in the customs house. Down below, the SEALs flinched at the sound. It was the shot that changed the equation. Anya was already moving. Her eyes scanned the battlefield, her mind processing the new geometry of the fight. An RPG gunner was leaning out of a 3rd-story window, preparing to finish off the disabled vehicle. He was her next target. She worked the bolt on the Barrett, solid, satisfying clack-clack chambering a new round. She found him in her scope. Breathed. Squeezed. Boom. The RPG gunner vanished in a pink mist. The rocket he was about to fire clattered uselessly to the street below. Next, the machine gun nest on top of the shipping containers. The 2-man team, spooked by the unseen force that was picking them off, was frantically scanning the area. They were looking in the wrong direction. Anya didn't give them time to find her. Boom. The round hit the machine gun itself, shattering the weapon into 1,000 pieces of lethal shrapnel and taking the gunner with it. His spotter dove for cover, but he was too slow. A second shot from an M4, fired by one of the now emboldened SEALs, finished the job. One by one, with methodical, unhurried precision, she began to dismantle the ambush. It was like untying a complex knot. She took out the command elements she could identify, the radio operators, the squad leaders. Each shot was a statement. Each silenced enemy position was a door opening for the men trapped below. Down in the kill zone, the members of Ghost Platoon heard the thunder of her rifle and felt the pressure begin to lift. The relentless crossfire lessened. Tin filtered. They had a ghost on their side, a guardian angel with a 5th. With renewed purpose, they began to move, no longer just surviving, but fighting back. The hunters had become the hunt. Confusion and panic began to ripple through the ranks of the Asaka Brigade. Their meticulously planned ambush was being systematically deconstructed by an invisible, impossibly accurate sniper. The storm, which had been their greatest advantage, now felt like a shroud, hiding a demon that struck from the gray veil of rain. An insurgent squad, attempting a flanking maneuver through a narrow alley, was stopped dead. Anya, tracking their movement from her perch, led the point man by a fraction of a second and fired. The heavy round punched through the thin wall of a dumpster he was using for cover and found him on the other side. The rest of the squad, seeing their leader drop, broke and scattered in terror. Another machine gun team was setting up on a rooftop across the street, hoping to re-establish the crossfire. They never got the chance. Anya saw the glint of the barrel as they hoisted it into position. Her first shot took out one man. Her second, fired before the first had even stopped echoing, took out the other. The heavy weapon toppled over the side of the building and crashed to the pavement below. The insurgents in Building 3, who had been pouring devastating fire into the SEAL's position, fell silent one by one. Anya tracked them through the windows, her bullets timed to their movements. A man would step into a window frame to reload, and her shot would meet him there. 6 times she fired, and 6 times a hardened fighter fell. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. They weren't just being killed, they were being erased, deleted from the battlefield with terrifying efficiency. Master Chief Sterling and his men capitalized on the chaos. The thunderous report of the friendly sniper became a drumbeat for their counterattack. Each boom was a signal to move, to gain a better position, to press the advantage. They leapfrogged from cover to cover, their own fire now focused and effective. They were no longer pinned prey. They were SEALs, and they were back in the fight. Sterling took out 2 insurgents who were retreating in disarray. Doc Ramirez finally reached Harker, dragging him into the relative safety of a bombed-out storefront. The tide of the battle had not just turned. It had been reversed in a violent, stunning reversal of fortune. Anya locked her second magazine into place. The cold brass felt reassuring in her hand. She scanned the battlefield, her eyes searching for the next priority target. But there were none. The enemy's resistance had crumbled. What had been a disciplined, coordinated attack had dissolved into a panicked, every-man-for-himself rout. The surviving insurgents were melting back into the labyrinthine alleys of Ras al-Hadid, their will to fight utterly broken. The storm still raged, but the storm of bullets had passed. Anya watched as the SEALs began to consolidate their position, setting up a defensive perimeter and tending to their wounded. Her job was done. She had balanced the books. 40 minutes later, the roar of Black Hawk helicopters finally sliced through the subsiding storm. Fast ropes snaked down, and Ghost Platoon was lifted out of the ruins, leaving behind a scene of carnage. They left their dead, but they were bringing their wounded home. They were alive. The debrief was a quiet, somber affair. The official count was 18 enemy dead, all from precision shots to the head or upper torso. None of the rounds matched the weapons carried by Ghost Platoon. The survivors sat in stunned silence, their faces etched with a mixture of grief, exhaustion, and profound mystery. They whispered theories among themselves. Had to be Delta. Man, nobody else makes shots like that in a hurricane. No way. That was CIA. A ghost operative. One of the younger SEALs, his eyes wide, simply said, "I think it was an angel." Commander Sterling filed his after-action report. It was concise and utterly devoid of explanation. He detailed the ambush, the casualties, and the eventual extraction. But for the decisive factor, the turning point of the entire engagement, he wrote only one cryptic line. Unknown friendly sniper element provided decisive fire support. Impact was critical to mission success. He knew no one would believe the truth, even if he knew what it was. An anonymous savior had descended from the storm and then vanished back into it. Miles away, in the quiet logistics office of the FOB, the fluorescent lights hummed. Gunnery Sergeant Anya Sharma sat at her desk, typing up routine inventory reports. Her hands moved steadily across the keyboard, her face a mask of calm professionalism. No one gave her a second glance. She was just the gunny, doing her job. Later that night, alone in her quarters, she cleaned her Barrett with meticulous care. Her own records were a model of bureaucratic tidiness. They showed 18 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition had been expended. The entry was filed cleanly, almost invisibly, under the heading, Training, Requisitions, Weapon Zeroing, and Ballistics Calibration. On paper, nothing unusual had happened. A supply sergeant had calibrated her rifle, but in a small, locked footlocker under her bunk, there was a newly empty box of ammunition. 18 spent shell casings were missing from her ledger, but 18 lives had been added back to the roster of the living. For Anya, the math worked out perfectly. In the days and weeks that followed, the whispers started. The story of the Ras al-Hadid ambush and the mysterious sniper who had single-handedly turned the tide spread through the base like wildfire. The jokes about the supply sergeant with the Barrett died on the operator's lips. The smirks were replaced with looks of cautious, unspoken respect. They still didn't know for sure, but they had their suspicions. No one dared to ask her directly. To do so would be to break the code, to demand an answer to a question that was better left as a legend. One evening, Master Chief Sterling found a single playing card slipped under his door. It was the Ace of Spades, the death card. On it, written in simple, clean handwriting, were 5 words. "Glad you made it home." He stared at the card for a long time, a feeling of profound gratitude washing over him. He tucked it into his wallet, a private memorial to the ghost who had saved his men. Months later, the incident, now officially code-named the Phantom Storm engagement, became a case study at the sniper school in Fort Bragg. Instructors presented the ballistics, data the wind speeds, the distance, the impossibly precise shot placement as a theoretical problem. They marveled at the skill required. This is what's possible. the instructors would say, but probably not repeatable. This shooter was a ghost. No name was ever attached to the file. The hero of the story remained anonymous, a phantom. The legend of the Phantom Storm Sniper grew, becoming a piece of military folklore whispered in forward operating bases and training halls around the world. It was a story about how on the worst day of your life, when all hope is lost, a savior might appear from the shadows, fire the shots that save you, and then melt away without ever asking for thanks. Anya Sharma returned to her quiet duties, a steadfast and unassuming presence in the logistics depot. The whispers and the newfound respect from the operators didn't change her. She remained the gunny, the woman who could find you a spare firing pin at 3 in the morning or chase down a missing shipment of medical supplies. In a small, polished wooden box in her footlocker, she kept 80 spent .50 caliber shell casings. They were her medals, her citations, her proof. They weren't trophies of kills, but reminders of lives saved, of a debt paid. Sometimes, a young, eager recruit, fresh-faced and full of ambition, would ask her how to earn respect in a world of hardened warriors. Her answer was always the same, delivered in her quiet, steady voice. The mission isn't about recognition. It isn't about medals or stories with your name on them. The mission is about getting your team home alive. That's Italiano. Everything else is just noise. Outside her small office window, a new team of SEALs was running drills, their shouts carried on the wind. She watched them, her gaze distant. The monsoon season was approaching, and she was already sharpening her calculations, updating her notebooks with new atmospheric data. She knew her work was never truly done. The world was an unstable place, and there would always be another storm, another team in trouble, another moment where a ghost with a rifle might be needed again. Her heroism lived not in the applause of the crowd, but in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It lived in the 18 lives that made it home, in the families that were not shattered by loss, in the silent nod of a master chief who understood the truth. It was proof that the greatest guardians are often the ones we never see. The quiet professionals who stand the watch while the world sleeps, content in the knowledge that their true reward is the mission itself. This story, while set on a battlefield, carries a powerful message that resonates deeply in our everyday lives. Anya Sharma represents the quiet competence and hidden strength that exists all around us, often in the people we least expect. It teaches us that true impact isn't always measured by titles, recognition, or public acclaim. It's measured by our actions, especially the ones we take when no one is watching. Her dedication to her craft, her endless study of ballistics and weather, reminds us of the power of mastery. Whatever your field, whatever your passion, strive to be the best, not for the applause, but for the day when your skills might be exactly what someone else needs to get through their own storm. True fulfillment often comes not from being noticed, but from being ready. Finally, Anya's story is a profound lesson in selfless service. Her only reward was knowing that 18 men went home to their families. In our own lives, we are constantly presented with opportunities to help, to support, to be the unseen force for good in someone else's life. It could be a kind word, a helping hand, or simply being there when it matters most. The most meaningful contributions are often anonymous, given freely without any expectation of return. So, I leave you with a few questions to think about. Who are the Anya Sharmas in your life? The quiet, unassuming people whose skills and dedication make your world a better, safer place. In what areas of your own life could you pursue mastery, not for recognition, but for readiness? Have you ever had a ghost help you through a difficult time? An anonymous act of kindness that changed everything? Thank you for joining me for this story. I hope it inspires you to look for the quiet heroes in your own life, and perhaps to be one yourself. We wish you all good health and a peaceful week ahead. If you enjoyed this story and the lessons it holds, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Your support helps us continue to share stories that matter.